Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today, we'll continue the heartfelt journey of Jack and Tu Tien, a story of love, devotion, and dreams coming true. After their beautiful engagement, Jack begins building something truly special, a dream home made with his own hands, filled with love, hope, and promises for their twins. It's not just a house, it's the beginning of their forever. If you enjoy this touching story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next emotional chapter of Jack and Tu Tien's journey. The morning light filters softly through the curtains, painting the small kitchen in shades of gold. Jack stands by the window, holding a mug of coffee, his eyes distant yet full of purpose. Outside, the land stretches quiet and peaceful, just the way Tu Tien likes it. After the proposal, something inside Jack shifted. The happiness of that night didn't fade. Instead, it settled into something deeper, a desire to build a future, not just promise one. Tu Tien walks in quietly, her hand resting on her belly. The faint sound of her slippers brushing against the floor makes Jack turn around. Her soft smile meets his. "Morning," she says gently. "Morning, my love," Jack replies, setting down the mug and walking toward her. He places a light kiss on her forehead. "How are the little ones today?" She chuckles softly, guiding his hand to her stomach. "They're quiet this morning. Maybe listening to their father thinking too much." Jack laughs. "You caught me." He reaches for the small roll of blueprints sitting on the counter. "I've been thinking about the house, our house." Tu Tien's brows lift slightly, curiosity shining in her eyes. "The one you mentioned before?" He nods, unrolling the paper across the kitchen table. The lines are rough sketches, more dream than design, but the idea is clear. "Right here," he says, pointing to the center. "This will be the heart of it all, our living room. Big windows, so sunlight can pour in every morning. And here," he traces another space with his finger. "This will be the nursery. 2 cribs, side by side." Tu Tien looks down at the drawing, her heart swelling. "Jack, you've already started planning." Jack smiles softly. "I've been planning since the day I met you, but now it's time to make it real." She runs her fingers lightly over the paper, imagining it all. The smell of fresh wood, the sound of laughter echoing through new walls. "It doesn't have to be big," she says quietly. "Just warm, just ours." Jack nods, his gaze steady. "That's exactly what I want." The next morning, the sound of hammering echoes through the air. The field behind their small house transforms into a construction site, modest but alive. Jack works with rolled-up sleeves, sweat dripping from his forehead as he drives nails into beams. Each strike carries meaning. Each cut of wood feels like carving out a piece of their future. Tu Tien stands nearby, holding a small bottle of water. Her belly has grown a little, her steps slower, but her eyes glow brighter than ever. "Jack, take a break," she calls out. He turns, smiling. "I can't. If I stop now, I'll lose the rhythm." She walks over, handing him the bottle anyway. "You'll lose your strength if you don't drink this." Jack laughs and takes the bottle, drinking gratefully. "You sound like my supervisor." "I'm your wife-to-be," she says with a playful grin. "That's even higher authority." He smiles wide, eyes glinting with affection. "Yes, ma'am." They stand together in the quiet moment, the breeze carrying the scent of wood and grass, the sound of birds in the distance. Jack looks around at the skeleton of beams rising before them. "It's nothing yet," he murmurs. But one day, it'll be the place where our kids take their first steps. Tu Tien rests her head on his shoulder, and where they'll run around, driving you crazy. He chuckles. I'll take that chaos any day. Days pass. The foundation solidifies. The frame grows taller. Jack works tirelessly, from dawn until the last light fades. Sometimes his hands bleed from the work, but he never complains. Each ache reminds him why he's doing it. Every nail, every brush of paint is a promise, not of perfection, but of love. At night, Tu Tien waits with warm soup and gentle words. She massages his tired shoulders as he leans back in the chair. You're working too hard, she whispers. Jack closes his eyes. I'm working for us. I know, she says softly, resting her hand on his. But remember, I need you healthy too. He opens his eyes, looking at her face, glowing, peaceful, full of quiet strength. You're the reason I am. One afternoon, as the sun begins to dip, Jack paints the outer walls. Tu Tien watches from a nearby bench, her hands folded over her belly, a sketchbook resting in her lap. She draws what she sees, not just the half-built house, but Jack within it. His focus, his patience, the way he hums softly to himself as he works. When he notices her watching, he calls out, "What are you drawing?" She smiles. "You, and our future." Jack laughs, wiping paint from his cheek. "Then make sure I look handsome." "You always do," she replies without hesitation. That evening, the sky turns gold and purple. Jack stands before the nearly finished house, arms crossed, breathing heavily, but smiling. Tu Tien joins him, walking slowly. She gazes up at the structure, the windows framed, the roof nearly complete. "It's beautiful," she whispers. "Not yet," Jack says, his voice gentle. "But it will be." She steps closer, placing her hands on the wooden doorframe. It already feels like home. Jack looks at her, emotion tightening his throat. "That's because you're here." They walk through the unfinished rooms, side by side, her hand brushing the smooth wood, his calloused fingers tracing along the wall. He points toward one small room near the back. "That'll be our kitchen, the one you always dreamed of." Tu Tien smiles softly, with a big window to watch the garden. "Exactly," Jack says, "and we'll plant roses out there. Red ones. Your favorite." She turns to him, eyes full of warmth. "Jack, I never thought I'd have this again. A home, a future. You gave that back to me." He cups her face gently. "No, Tu Tien, you gave it to me first. I just built the walls around it." The last rays of sunlight bathe them in gold. The wind rustles through the open frame, carrying laughter that seems to belong to a life still unfolding. Later that night, as the house settles into quiet, Jack sits outside under the stars. His hands are rough, his clothes dusty, but his heart feels light. Tu Tien brings him a blanket and sits beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Jack," she whispers, "you've already given me everything I ever wanted." He looks at her, a soft smile curving his lips. "Not yet," he says. "Wait until you see it finished." Tu Tien tilts her head, teasing. "And what will it be then?" Jack gazes toward the house, still glowing faintly under the moonlight. "It'll be more than a house," he says quietly. "It'll be the place where our dreams live, where you'll laugh, where they'll grow up, and where I'll grow old, with you." Tu Tien doesn't speak. She just smiles, eyes glistening, her fingers intertwining with his. The night stretches around them, gentle and infinite, wrapping their dreams like a promise. Morning sunlight streams across the valley, painting the half-finished house in warm gold. The hammering has stopped for the first time in weeks, replaced by the sound of birds and the whisper of wind moving through open windows. Jack stands outside, gazing at what he and Tu Tien have built, not with money, but with patience and love. Inside, the smell of fresh paint and sawdust mixes with the scent of jasmine that Tu Tien placed in a small vase. The walls gleam softly in the light. Jack runs his hand along the smooth wooden railing and exhales, a quiet smile touching his lips. Every inch of this home carries a memory. Her laughter when she first saw the kitchen plan, the way her eyes glistened when he talked about the nursery, the way she'd bring him cool water every afternoon and whisper, "Don't work too hard, Jack." Today, the house is finally ready. Tu Tien steps outside, wearing a simple cream dress. Her hair is tied back, and her face glows with that unmistakable radiance of motherhood. She walks slowly, one hand supporting her belly. Jack turns when he hears her, his eyes lighting up immediately. "You shouldn't be walking out here without shoes," he teases softly. "I couldn't wait any longer," she replies, smiling. "You've been keeping me away for days." Jack grins. "That's because I wanted this moment to be perfect." He walks toward her and takes her hands, covering them gently with his calloused palms. "Tu Tien," he says quietly, "today isn't about wood or bricks. It's about keeping my promise." He leads her to the front door, a simple wooden one, painted white, with a tiny heart carved into the side. He pauses, looking at her with a boyish grin. "Ready?" She nods. The door creaks open, and warm sunlight spills across the floor. Tu Tien steps in, her eyes widening. The house glows. The walls are painted soft cream with faint hints of gold. The living room opens into wide windows, letting in gentle daylight. A handmade wooden table sits in the corner, topped with a vase of fresh flowers. The scent of pine and paint mingles with the faint aroma of the sea breeze drifting through the open window. Jack follows her, watching her reaction like it's the most important thing in the world. She turns slowly, her lips trembling. "Jack, this is beautiful." He shrugs, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's home." They move through the house together, from room to room, laughter and wonder filling the air. In the kitchen, the shelves are neatly lined with jars. A small window overlooks the field, where they plan to grow vegetables. "I made sure there's enough light here," Jack says, "so you can watch the sunrise while cooking breakfast." Tu Tien laughs softly. "You make it sound like a fairy tale." He leans close. "It is. You're my fairy tale." They move to the nursery, the smallest but brightest room in the house. Two white cribs stand side by side, with little blue and yellow ribbons tied to the corners. A framed ultrasound photo hangs on the wall above them. Tu Tien's hands fly to her mouth, her voice trembling. "Jack, you did all this?" He nods, his throat tight. "I wanted them to have a place that already feels full of love, even before they arrive." Tu Tien walks closer to the cribs, tracing the edge with her fingertips. Her tears fall quietly. "They're going to be so happy here." Jack wraps his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "They already are. They're growing up in love." For a moment, the world seems to stop. The light through the window touches their faces, soft and golden. The silence between them is full, not empty, filled with all the words that don't need to be said. Tu Tien turns around, placing both hands gently on his chest. "Jack, I don't know how to thank you." He shakes his head. You already have. She smiles, eyes glistening. No, Jack, you don't understand. You built this house, but you also built me, piece by piece, after I was broken. Jack cups her face, his voice barely above a whisper. Then let's stay built, together. No more storms, just us. They stand there, foreheads touching, hearts steady, breaths mingling. Later that afternoon, they sit outside on the porch. Jack has finished painting the front steps. Tu Tien rocks gently on the chair, both hands on her belly, humming softly. Jack sits beside her, his arm draped over the back of her chair. You know, Tu Tien says, her tone playful, when the twins grow up, they'll probably say their father worked too hard. Jack chuckles. Then I'll tell them I worked hard because I wanted them to have something worth coming home to. She tilts her head toward him. And me? He smiles. You're the reason home exists. The sun begins to sink lower, casting long golden shadows across the yard. The house gleams in the fading light, a quiet monument to love, patience, and hope. Inside, the table is set with a simple meal. Jack lights 2 candles. Tu Tien sits down, resting her hand on his. To us, she whispers. Jack raises his glass. To this house, and the life we'll build in it. They eat quietly, occasionally laughing about little things. The crooked cabinet, the uneven paint stroke, the nail Jack accidentally hammered sideways. Every imperfection feels perfect now. When night falls, they step out again. The stars shimmer above the house like blessings. The gentle wind stirs the curtains inside, and somewhere, an owl hoots softly. Jack wraps a blanket around Tu Tien's shoulders. Do you hear that? He asks. She listens. The faint hum of crickets, the breeze through the fields. It sounds like peace. That's exactly what it is, Jack says. After everything we've been through, I think we've earned it. Tu Tien leans her head against his shoulder. This house, it's not just wood and nails, Jack. It's every dream I ever had, every prayer I whispered when I thought no one was listening. Jack kisses the top of her head. Someone was listening. I was. Silence again, soft, deep, meaningful. The kind of silence that only exists between people who truly understand each other. As the moon rises higher, Jack takes her hand and guides her to the doorway. Before we go to bed, there's one more thing, he says. He opens a small wooden box on the shelf near the entrance. Inside is a tiny brass key. This key, he says, placing it in her palm, is yours. You're the heart of this home. Nothing opens without you. Tu Tien stares at the key, tears glimmering in her eyes. Jack. He smiles. Welcome home, my love. She throws her arms around him, laughing through her tears. The twins stir gently inside her, as if feeling the joy in the air. Outside, the night deepens, wrapping the house in quiet peace. Inside, 2 hearts rest beneath a roof built by love. And somewhere between the whisper of the wind and the glow of candlelight, the promise of their future settles. Not as a dream, but as something real, standing strong against the horizon. Their dream home, their forever,